Hello, Taylor Elwood here from the Mature Masculinity podcast. And today I am thrilled and excited to have Anthony, and I don't know how to say your last name, so I might butcher it, Ragonese.
Ragonese is perfect.
Okay, wow. Hey, got it on the first go. Good. Anthony Ragonese. And Anthony, please introduce yourself and tell us who you are, what you do, and a little bit about you.
Sure, sure. Well, I'm Anthony. I am 40 years old. I live in Syracuse, New York, and I am um, I am a sex coach working on my certification with Cam Fraser's Institute of Sacred Sexuality, and I've also been involved in men's work and various types of spiritual work and other types of work over the years. So I've been doing this type of thing, in different capacity, different forms for a while. So.
Excellent. Yeah. And I actually had the fortune of having a session with you because you're doing your certification process. I was one of the people who signed up with you for that, and I just want to tell viewers that I absolutely got so much out of that session. It was really helpful for me doing a piece of healing around a recent breakup and around some of it was me taking ownership of some of the harm I had done to somebody, but some of it was also being able to heal some of the wounding that I had received as well. And so I found it to be a really helpful session. It was interesting because it definitely led into some other adventures that I had in September around that same work. And so it was a powerful kickoff, as it were, to the whole thing. And so let's talk a little bit about what sexuality coaching is, what's involved with that, because I think a lot of times when people think about sex, they're usually thinking of it in very specific contexts. But what my experience with you was not necessarily that context. It wasn't like, oh, here's the best pickup lines or anything like that. It was instead really about connecting with the sacredness of sexuality in my experience. So tell me in your words what sexuality coaching is and how it relates to our exploration of masculinity as men.
Yeah, I think really the heart of sex coaching is about getting in touch with yourself, and getting in touch with your partner if you have a partner, and getting in touch with the sacredness of all of it, of your experience as an individual and your experience that you're sharing with another person. I think sex coaching is also a very subjective experience. I think everyone is going to get something a little different out of it. Everyone sort of comes looking for this work for a different reason. Sometimes they have physical concerns that and obviously I'm not a doctor or a therapist, and I can help people within a certain capacity. But I think some people need coaching to help point them in the right direction, maybe to help them find resources, or to help them explore things that they had never considered before. And I think that's really the role of the coach, is to sort of lead the client into finding the answers. I don't have all the answers, but I can help them find the answers. That's the role of the coach, essentially. So yeah, just part of it is imparting my wisdom, my experience that I have, but a lot of it is just giving the client space and helping them find their way.
Hmm. Sure. No, and I mean, I do men's coaching, so I mean, I get it. It's the same kind of thing where it's like holding that space, providing some guidance, but also knowing when to get out of the way.
Mhm.
And at the same time, it's interesting. I are you familiar with an organization called Kinhood?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hadn't heard of it until you told me about it, but yeah,
Okay,
I'm
yes.
sort of
Okay.
familiar with it now.
Yeah. Okay, I did tell you about it in our session because I went through a male sexuality course with them, and I thought it was really fascinating because one of the biggest things that I found fascinating about it was just how much I learned about male sexuality. I think that one of the issues that I've experienced and that I observe around men, there's actually a couple of experiences I want to talk about them, but one of them is how much men don't know about their own sexuality. So what are your thoughts about that? Do you agree with that, or do you find that
Oh
to be
yeah,
true? Or
yeah.
yeah.
I think so. Yeah, I think a lot of men don't know about their own sexuality. I mean, I think men get a lot of ideas from the media of what male sexuality is supposed to look like. The way male sexuality is portrayed in TV and film, for example, and in pop culture, and also, of course, in porn. Men get a lot of ideas from porn as well. And I'll say, I'm not anti-porn by any means. I think porn can be wonderful if you have a healthy relationship with it. I think maybe a lot of men don't have a healthy relationship with it, but I think that's an entire conversation in itself. But it just speaks to the messaging that men get about their sexuality and how they sort of pattern themselves after that. And they don't really have, a lot of men don't really have resources to really challenge those ideas and or maybe expand on them or give them, an alternative perspective. So yeah, I think a lot of men just sort of do what they know or what they're taught or what their background is or what they're exposed to. So I think a lot of men don't know their own sexuality. And they also don't know their own bodies too. I think a lot of men are very disembodied. They don't take the time to really explore themselves. Um, I mean, whether it's, just through like, whether it's through self-pleasure practices or, just knowing yourself while you're with a partner, your capacity of being an individual and being with someone else at the same time. The expectations of what sex is supposed to look like, various narratives around that, as like penis-oriented sex in general, whether it's a man and a woman or two men or whatever the combination of people is, if there's a penis involved, a narrative usually is around penetration. So penetration-focused sex is usually what a lot of men know. So I think a lot of men, they don't they know those things and they don't know anything beyond that. And I think part of doing this work is maybe helping them, find something else, find something more to it, something that they hadn't considered, and maybe something more about themselves. Yeah, I think in a nutshell, I think yeah, a lot of men are just very um, not attuned to their own bodies and to their own pleasure. I think they're just a lot of them are just very. A lot of men are very focused on, like I said, following those narratives and you know, and they don't know much beyond that. But which is kind
I
of sad. I think men need better education around their sexuality.
I totally agree. I mean, I am 47 years old, and I would say that until I took that class, I did not fully appreciate the full range of my male sexuality. I took that class earlier this year, so 47 years old, and it's taken me this long to even begin to discover. And it was funny after that class, and then after reading a couple of books and some other things and kind of looking at things, the thing that really stood out to me is like, wow, most of the porn that's out there, I don't watch a lot of it, but occasionally I do. But most of it, it's so penis centric. It's
Mhm.
so focused on that. It's so focused on penetration, and it's like there's this whole realm. And it's interesting too because I was reading this one book. It was called The Man's Guide to Women or something like that. And in the book, they were talking about how, and this was a heterocentric book. So I just want to note that to people who are watching this, obviously by the title, but I'm just going to say it anyway. But what they were talking about is how, like, for the woman, her entire body was an erogenous zone, basically. But that for the man, the erogenous zone was just his penis.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I'm like, that just seems so wrong because the fact of the matter is, like, men have a whole body. Just like there are so many things. Like your fingers could be an erogenous zone. Your
Yeah.
wrist, all that other stuff. So it's like, what the WTF? And yet this is the education that we've been given. Guess what? The only thing that matters is this thing down here, and it better be able to perform. I mean, that too. That was the other thing. I'm just like, oh, that's one of the things that I realized. Like, I've really been deconstructing this in the last couple of months lately. Is just in particular, like how much my own experience around sexuality and sensuality has been based around trying to please somebody else,
Mhm.
and how much it's been oriented around can my little man down here perform when I need him to? Now I'm like, no, I really don't want that anymore. Like, I'm like, yeah, I want to enjoy that part, but I also want to I want to actually experience enjoyment. I want somebody to actually want to kiss me all over my body and touch me and all these other things. And I haven't had that. So I'm like,
Mhm.
man, I have missed out on a whole world of sensuality and sexuality. And it's really kind of hitting home in that. And so I think that like this is like a really important discussion to have. And And this kind of couples with something else that I've observed about men, is that in general, men are really uncomfortable talking about sex.
Hmm. Yeah, unless they're joking about it or saying something derogatory about it. That seems to be the case, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
or they're talking about their quote unquote conquests, right? Like
oh
how
yeah,
many people
conquest.
they've
Oh
slept
yeah.
with. But they're not comfortable talking about their sexuality in relationship to like the discovery of themselves, or like the times when they don't feel comfortable with their sexuality, or they don't feel, or they didn't necessarily, and that's not even putting into factor like sexual trauma, which is a whole nother conversation, but is also equally just as relevant to this as well. Like we don't have conversations around that, and I think it's because partially because of the man culture, so to speak, which is kind of like, okay, we're only going to talk about sex in relationship to performance or joking about it. But I also think it's because men, and this is just my own experience, so I'll say it, my I statements here. I found myself feeling deeply insecure about my own sexuality and my own connection to my sexuality and my body. And it's taken me a long time to acknowledge and admit that. And I actually feel more confident now because I can acknowledge and admit that. What are your thoughts about that?
Mm. My goodness, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll say, first of all, I just honor your journey because, I mean, I mean, we've only spoken a couple times now, but yeah, I'm grateful that you've been seeking, resources. You've been curious and looking and exploring yourself, and I think that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. And I thank you for sharing that with me. I mean, in our coaching session and here, and just with the world in general. So thank you for being present and for being curious and learning and growing as a man and as a human being. Um, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to begin with what you just said. Um, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just absorbing all of that.
I know it's
Um,
a lot, isn't it? But I mean,
it is.
that's what I'm seeing, like with men in general. Like it's interesting. Like I've sat in men's circles where like it's kind of like verboten. We do not talk about sexuality, and I'm
Mhm.
like, why? Like I want to talk about this. This is something
Yeah,
that's important to who we are, and we're pushing it to the side because heavens forbid that we acknowledge that we're sexual beings or that we have deep insecurities around it or any of the other things. And I think this is part of the healing of men that needs to occur so that
yeah,
we can show up safer in the world for other people around us.
yeah,
Because until we heal our own sexual wounds and traumas and fears and insecurities, we're not going to show up. Instead, it's going to be performative. Oh, well,
mhm.
can I perform for this other person? Can I please this other person? Can I get this other person to come? How
Yeah.
often has that been the narrative?
Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. And I think the problem is, I mean, as you said, it's the societal expectations of manhood. You have to fit inside the man box, the expectations of what it means to be a man, how to show up as a man, how you're supposed to, not supposed to feel or express emotions except for anger for some reason. I don't know why. I have no problem with anger, but they can't cry. Seems to be so common. But I mean, I don't mean to laugh, but I just from my own experience and just knowing men in general, it's just a wild thing being a man and being in this world and trying to navigate. I mean, I can speak a little bit, to I mean, my experience, as a queer man is maybe a little different than from a heterosexual man. Um,
Hmm.
I think that I sort of for me, I was sort of almost I had to be bold and be the one to say those things that nobody wanted to say, for my own safety and my own health and my own well-being and my own authenticity. I had to be the one to talk about the sexuality and the things that make people uncomfortable. Um, because no one else was talking about it. And I'm like, hey, this is important. We should be talking about this. Why can't we talk about it? So I was always the one to maybe initiate that, push that a little bit, and make people uncomfortable, which has been both a blessing and a curse. It comes with a lot of pain to explore that and to be that open with people, and to deal with their opinions or their rejection or maybe backlash that comes from that. So there's a lot involved with that. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's hard. I think that men sort of have to unpack uh uh they have to unpack their masculinity, first of all, what it means to be masculine, because that's still something that I don't even know myself. I mean, masculinity to me means something different than it means to someone else. I think masculinity is a very subjective individual experience. It's not something that can be defined or put in a category that's universal for everyone. I think it's, instead of masculinity, it's more like masculinities, plural. I think that's a more accurate way to put it. There are many ways to be a man or to be masculine. And I for me, I also embrace my sacred feminine as well. I mean, I've always been a very much attuned to that, and that's sort of been a part of my journey. Not both in terms of my gender and how I express myself, but also my sexuality too. Like, how does my sacred feminine play into the sexual realm too? So there's a lot of interplay there, but yeah, I don't know.
You,
Yeah, I
you
don't
touched
know. I
on
was
something.
talking about masculinity and stuff, and I sort of got sidetracked. But there's a lot of intersection here between different things, and my brain is sort of being pulled in different directions. So
Okay, well that's all right. This is the way these interviews go, so don't feel too bad because I go all over the place.
yeah,
So
I get
you
it.
actually touched on something which I think is really important, that really struck me, which is, a man's relationship with his inner feminine. Because I agree with you, like I definitely have my inner femininity as well. Part of my healing work in the month of September, and you helped facilitate some of this, as well as going to an event called Convergence through Sacred Sons, where they had both men and women there, was around, for me, it was around healing my relationship with my inner feminine, and seeing how that relationship with the inner feminine had been expressed outwardly, at times, and some of the things that had shown up. So I think that's an interesting aspect there, like what can we do? What can men do, regardless of what your sexual orientation is, to become more comfortable with that inner feminine and to accept it as an inherent part of the sexual expression of being a man? Because I think it is.
Mhm, mhm. That's a good question. Um, Honestly, the first thing that's coming to me is I think that men should talk to women. Talk to women. Like, get opinions and experiences from women. I think that I think that men in general, I see it among straight men as well as gay men, tend to hang around with circles of people who are like them. So straight men tend to hang around with a lot of straight men, gay men tend to hang around with a lot of gay men. That's not always true, but I think that just naturally we tend to gravitate to people who are like us. And I think that in order to maybe help facilitate uh, getting in touch with the feminine, maybe some men should actually talk to women, like hang out with women, get an opinion from a woman, get a different perspective from a woman. Uh, uh, See, I'll tell you, what's interesting. It's just like almost an unrelated thought, but it's sort of related. But so I was at an event a couple months ago. I was co-facilitating a workshop about exploring the sacred masculine. And it wasn't exclusively a men's workshop, anybody could come, but it was specifically about the sacred masculine, and mostly men came. But there was a woman that came, and I loved her presence there because she added so much more to this circle than any of these other men could. I mean, she just contributed a perspective that was completely different, and I love that. And the men were so wonderful and beautiful and respectful to her. They just really welcomed her presence. And I think maybe men should have that. I think maybe we should have maybe a woman in a men's space to maybe challenge things a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really thought about, that in particular, but I think another aspect of that too is maybe exploring the spiritual part of that too, is maybe men exploring their inner goddess, what that means to them. Who is your goddess? Who do you connect with? I mean, it could be, a goddess from an actual pantheon, or it could be, something that's symbolic to whoever. Um, but yeah, I think maybe doing some work and some rituals around connecting with the sacred feminine, which honestly I admit is something that I've been lacking in. Like I mean, I think that the feminine just naturally occurs in me naturally. Like I don't really acknowledge it blatantly in my spiritual work. I tend to focus on, the queerness and the masculine aspect and the phallic aspects of it, just because that's what I jive with. But yeah, I don't know. I think maybe exploring the Venus side of things instead of, the Mars side of things. But I don't know. Those are some of
Well,
my thoughts.
yeah, like for example, in my case, my one of the ways I explore my inner feminine is a relationship with Aphrodite.
Mhm,
She's my patron goddess, and then I also explore the masculine through a relationship with Eros. So,
mhm,
kind of working with them both, and in that way. And I think that it is really important to explore kind of the inner feminine, and it's interesting because I would say that like if I look at my own life, for a long time I actually did kind of swing toward exploring my inner feminine, but I did it in a way where like I wasn't fully conscious of it. And then and then I had a realization in the wake of a really hard breakup a couple years ago that I didn't really even know myself as a man. And so I was
mhm,
like, okay, I need to get to know myself as a man. Like, what does it mean to be a man? Like, I didn't have a good model for masculinity growing up. And
mhm,
so, like, I didn't know. And so I started getting into that work. And then recently, I came to the realization it's like, okay, I've been doing a lot of work around men's work, and I'm glad I'm doing it. But now it's time to start reintegrating in that feminine. And so that's one of the reasons why I think September was so moving for me. And actually, in December of this year, which is 2024, for people who are watching this many years down the line, I'm actually going to what's called a His Weekend, but it's in California where it's being facilitated by both men and women, and it's basically around men doing their work with the feminine. And I agree with you. I think that when you inject woman into the mix with this work, it brings a whole new level of intensity. I do think that it's important to have like for this kind of work. I do think it's important for men to have men only space and for women to have women only space so that they can do their work and process in a space that feels safe for them. Because I've definitely found that to be invaluable. But then I also think it's important to have that container of both men and women together sometimes to do that work, and but to do it in a way that it is safe. I mean, one of the things I really appreciated about Convergence is that the first night, the woman went in for dinner, and the people running the event said to all the men, wait out here for a few minutes. We need to talk. And they said, look, this isn't a hookup event. This isn't a festival. You're not here to flirt. You're not, these women are trusting you. They are trusting you, and we need to show them that they are safe so that they can do their work and you can do your work, and you can come together and do the work. And so there can't like anything that happens here, there's no sex, there's no expectation. Like they were very clear about it, and I appreciated that because it was needed, and I think that's an important aspect of it. But it brings a whole new level of intensity. So I bet that workshop had that intensity because you had this woman there who was exploring her sacred masculine, and it's like, whoa, well, what does that mean? And it's a different thing. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was really wonderful, and I actually connected with her after because she's an erotic coach too, so she does something similar. But yeah, I think having a woman in that space, because we did a couple workshops, and I think the first one was all men, and the second one was when she showed up, and I think it just sort of shifted the whole dynamic, like just added a whole different energy to that, and I was just really grateful for that. I was kind of hoping, maybe we would get a couple women. So I'm glad that we did. But I do agree that I mean, and there is a need for men's only spaces too. Absolutely. I mean, I think that's always the case. I think men need a container for them to talk amongst themselves and to feel safe about talking about certain things. I think that's important. I've done I did a 3-month program with the Mankind Project. That was my first introduction into men's work because I knew that I wanted to do this type of thing. So yeah, I was part of a men's circle in there. It was we were basically learning how to run a men's circle and how to create that container for ourselves. I
I
mean, we
did the
had
same. I did the same program, so I know what you're talking about. Circle of
yeah,
Men. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yep, yeah. No, and that was a wonderful experience for me. I'm really glad that I did that. I didn't end up carrying on like some of the other men afters. They ended up carrying on the circle, and I think they're still going today. Some of them are so. But I didn't end up doing that because I was sort of trying to get more into the erotic realm, trying to get more into the sexual side of things, which was my primary interest. So but yeah, but yeah, but having a space where men can talk about those things is so important. Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think that's true for anyone. I think women need their own spaces. I think queer people need their own spaces. I think trans people need their own spaces. I mean, I think we all should have a circle where we can, or a place where we can get together with people who are like us and feel safe talking about issues that are relevant to us, as people, our shared experiences as individuals. So yeah, no, absolutely.
So here's an interesting question for you too. This is something this is something I'm curious about. If you're attracted to a certain type of person, does that make you like that person? So I'll use an example. I dated somebody who identified as queer, and I would say most of the people that I've dated in my life have been queer. I have never really identified as queer. I've had a couple of experiences, but they've not been healthy experiences with other men. So ultimately, I've kind of maybe someday it'll be something I explore more if I get to the point where I have enough healing around it. I'm kind of on a healing journey with that, but at least at the time of this recording, I would say I don't identify that way. So if you're attracted to someone, does that make you like if I'm attracted to someone who's queer, does that make me queer? Or like how is that determined? Because I thought it was
No,
an interesting argument that the person made. And at the same time, I was kind of like, it feels like you're trying to make me be you because I'm attracted to you, as opposed to just allowing me to be me and have my experience, which is attraction to you, without me imposing anything else on you other than the fact that I'm attracted to you.
yeah, yeah. You are who you are, and nobody else can, determine that but you. I think, labels can be useful for people who are looking for some sort of identification for themselves. I think labels can be tricky once we start um, expecting them of people and hoisting them on people and projecting our labels or our expectations of what those mean on other people. And I think that's the problem. I think, I mean, I see that too with I mean, I see that specifically a lot with heterosexual men who maybe, I mean, I'm not speaking of you, but I'm just sort of thinking, outside in general, but men who are for all intents and purposes straight, but maybe they have sex with men on occasion, or maybe they, have some sort of feelings for a man or some sort of something for another man or someone who is not a woman. Um, and they still are, they feel that they are straight, then they are. I mean, I think that they are. I think that sexuality is very nuanced and complex, and I think that there's a lot of intersecting spectra. We often talk about sexuality being on a spectrum, but I think sexuality is a bunch of different spectra intersecting with each other and interplaying with each other in different ways. That's the way I see it. I know that my journey with my own sexuality is complex. I mean, my primary attraction in relationships have been with men, but not exclusively. I mean, I've had, feelings and attractions in relationships with other people too. Um, but I don't think that just because you are attracted to a certain person means that you are like that person or that you have to identify as that person. I think that's kind of absurd. And I think, trying to place that expectation on someone or put someone in that category is very suffocating. I wouldn't want to be like that. And it really angers me when people do that, I mean, like I said, straight men who maybe don't conform to the expectations of what heterosexuality is supposed to look like are automatically called gay. Like, oh, you must be gay. like sexuality exists on this binary of, you're either straight or you're gay, and there's no anything.
There's no nuance or anything else in between.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And there's tons of nuances and intricacies. I mean, and you get into things of it's not even just men and women, it's genders in general, it's sexualities in general. It's you also can incorporate things like maybe kink and stuff like that. If you have, preference for that, that's part of your sexuality too. And also, there's also asexuality. I'm sort of exploring um, that world, the world of asexuality. I identify as a demisexual person. That just means that I need to have an emotional connection with someone in order to feel really sexually attracted to them. But of course, for me, there are also nuances to that too. I mean, I do experience different types of attractions to people at different times. So I mean, it's very fluid. It fluctuates. But I think that is I wouldn't say all sexuality is fluid and fluctuating, but I mean, I think some people are very concrete in their sexuality. I think there are people who are one way and that's how they are throughout their lives. And that's cool if that works for them. But I think sexuality generally, broadly, is just very complex and nuanced and just lots of different things to consider. And it's often very contradictory too. I mean, not everything fits neatly inside of a category, inside of a box. And I think that's just human nature. And I think that we need to be having more of those conversations because I think that people in general, it doesn't matter who you are. I think straight people do it to themselves. I think gay people do it to themselves. I think men do it to themselves. We all sort of place this expectation on people of they're supposed to conform to this way of being. If they're going to identify this way, and if they're not, then they're lying or they're in the closet or whatever the case may be. But I don't think that's always true. I think it's much more complex and nuanced than a lot of people think. And I think that's something that we need to explore more just as people and have those conversations and challenge those ideas of what these narratives and what these categories are supposed to look like. So
Well,
that's something.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, that kind of gets me thinking just in general, like how important it is to challenge the societal perspectives as well. I mean, I will fully admit, as a person who pretty much does identify as a straight heterosexual man, that I definitely come into a relationship with an ideas in terms of what I want that might be limited. I mean, I'm realizing this in regards to just like how penis centric my
Mhm.
approach to sexuality has been for so much of my life. And I'm like, there's a lot more here that could be explored. And I've kind of missed the boat. Like I've missed 90% of the experience. Now, and I'm a kinky guy. Like I've had some, kinky experiences and things like that. So it's not like I haven't had some experiences, but as I've been exploring my own sexuality and recognizing this, I'm like, there's a lot that's been missed here that could be explored and could be equally enjoyable. So, I think you're absolutely right that we have to deconstruct that societal thing, but then also our own narratives as well. So that's really refreshing to hear. Um, what what advice would you give to someone who is, maybe watching this and they're kind of like, oh, wow, there's a lot more to my sexuality. What advice would you give to them in terms of starting to explore their sexuality, starting to explore their body, and moving aside from the genital centric? I'm going to say genital centric because I'm sure I have an audience of women as well as men and people who identify otherwise as well. So, I'm not going to assume that it's just one person or another, but like moving away from that genital centric perspective.
Um, I think there's a couple different things there. I think moving away from the genital centric approach, I think taking the time to, well, first of all, getting in touch with your body, not necessarily in an erotic sense or a sexual sense right away, but just really getting to know your body because so many people are just disembodied. I think that naturally human beings are I wouldn't say naturally, but I think artificially human beings are disembodied just because of as a result of the society that we live in, just because I think we're always distracted by content, by social media, by the news, by politics, by everything all the time. Everything is bombarding us and pulling us out of ourselves and away from ourselves. And I think so few people actually take the time to really go within and get in touch with themselves. Even just sitting for 20 minutes and just closing your eyes and doing some deep breathing, not with any expectations of anything, but really just focusing on breathing. I think, breath is a very fundamental part of a lot of different uh, practices, whether we're talking about spiritual or esoteric practices or health practices in general. But I think starting with breath is a very fundamental thing. I would start with that, getting in touch with your breath, and sitting with yourself for a little while, and maybe even feeling a little uncomfortable at first, of doing that, because so many people don't know how to do that.
Hmm.
Um, but allowing yourself that space and getting in touch with yourself, and maybe starting with that and incorporating some self-touch, maybe not even starting with the genitals, like what feels good to you. Like, do you get a lot of tension in your shoulders? Maybe massage your shoulders or do some stretches, do something to
Yeah,
get
see, I'm doing it right now. Like,
you feeling your
oh,
body. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Something to get you touching or feeling your body, moving your body in some way, and just doing that for a little while. Just focusing on getting in tune with your body for a while. And then and then from there, I would branch out into maybe doing, incorporating that into a self-pleasure practices, touching yourself in a way that feels good. You can incorporate your genitals into that, but of course, our bodies are filled with erogenous zones. I mean, I think a little bit more and more men are starting to notice that a little more. I think gay men are better at it than straight men are. I think straight men are just very out of tune with the erogenous zones of their body. But I think it's true of men in general broadly. But I just think that like your nipples, like a lot of people have very sensitive erogenous nipples, and nipple play is a wonderful thing for people of all genders. So maybe, or even just touching your chest, whatever feels good. And of course, maybe some. I mean, some people might not want to do this right away, but some people, it might be good and healthy and healing for them, is maybe doing some ass play. Explore your butt a little bit. You don't even have to like penetrate right away necessarily. I mean, if you've never done it before, like even just massaging your anus is a wonderful thing. I've done that sometimes too, just like massaging the outside of the anus. Sometimes that feels good, sometimes.
Like
um,
touching your glutes, for example, like, letting your hand just like that's something I've done a lot. And it's like this is a really sensitive area of my body. It feels really
yeah.
good.
Yeah, and just noticing that, like touching the area of your body and feeling it and noticing the sensations of your body, like what comes up for you when you touch that? What does that feel like? What does that sensation feel like? And how does it feel emotionally too? Does anything come up there when you touch that? Just being in tune with those feelings and exploring them and giving yourself space to do that is so important. But yeah, I think I would start with that. If someone is very genital focused, or very penis focused, very penetration focused, I would encourage them to explore themselves a little bit more first, starting with themselves first. And if you're doing that with a partner, or if you have a partner, maybe talking to them about exploring other forms of touch or sexy play, something other than, especially if you're a couple that's very penetration focused. There's a lot of, like you said before, there's a lot of pressure of men to perform, and men are just very performative. You have to be erect, 100% erect, and you have to be ready to go. And you know but yeah, but I think that but I think, yeah, just sorry, my brain is woo.
That's okay. It's all right. I mean,
I know, I know, I know, I know,
we're
but
having some fun juicy conversation here. Let's just
I was
get
trying to
into
circle
it.
it. I was trying to circle it around to something, but my brain just keeps going off in these other directions. So
So one of the things that that stood out to me about my recent experiences at Convergence is they talked about how, they were like, One of the things that we hear from the woman is that they wish men would slow down. And I thought about it and I'm like, well, this could apply in general. Like, what would it be like to just slow down in general? And so for me, like, it was interesting because September was one of the most restful months of my life and also one of the most intense months of my life. Like I went through all this transformation while trying to rest and relax. Go
Mhm.
figure. I think because it was just like I gave myself the space, and so a lot of things came up. But one
Yeah.
of the things that I did is I held my hands up with somebody else, and I waited until we just slowly we looked into each other's eyes, and we slowly moved our hands, kind of like what I'm doing right now toward the camera here for those of you who are watching on YouTube or on Substack. And so we touched, and then we just looked in each other's eyes. And I thought, like, that was a very erotic, sensual experience that could be had right there. But it was slow. It was like I moved my hands to a certain degree, and then I waited, and that person moved their hands closer, and then, you know. So I also think there is something to be said for exploring slowly. Like we don't have to be in a rush. Like I can just touch the side of my face like this and go slow, and I could just rest my hand here for a bit and be present with it. You know, I so yeah, that's in and of itself. Like let's give ourselves that depth and that breadth of being with our bodies without it even having to be erotically charged or anything else, just being. And then slowly allow ourselves to do something different.
Beautiful. That was beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, I think I think that's just so true. I think men, I mean, I think people maybe in general, but I think men in particular need to slow down sometimes. Uh, I think there's so much to that. I think part of it too, I mean, going back to maybe the self talk of self-pleasure practices is the way that men masturbate. And men tend to masturbate very fast, very quick, very aggressively, often. Sometimes they're watching porn. I think some men are conditioned that way from when they're very young because they, need to jerk off very fast or else, they don't want to get caught or something. There's a lot of shame and secrecy around that. And I think that sort of builds up this conditioning of masturbating a certain way, and I think men just sort of become accustomed to that in some way, and then maybe they don't know how to slow down, and I think they haven't really given themselves space to slow down. Um, so yeah, I think self-pleasure practice is a part of that too, and I think that's so crucial too because I think because men have this way. I mean, I don't want to say this as an absolute claim or that there's any that I know for certain that there's any um, studies behind it or anything because I haven't actually researched this solidly. But I think that a lot of men, because that they masturbate a certain way, that they're used to jerking off very fast, when they're with a partner, they expect sex to go like that too. They expect sex to go very fast, very aggressively, and they sort of carry that with them. Um, I mean, I mean, again, as a queer man, my experience is a little different because I'm having sex with men usually, and I've actually had a few experiences recently. So so currently I'm staying here in an Airbnb. I don't even have a home of my own. And since I've been in a strange place, I've been taking the liberty of maybe hooking up with some people, which I normally don't do a lot, but I just decided to have a little fun because it's not my house and I can do it,
Yeah,
if I
not your house. You can do what you want, right?
yeah. So I've had some experiences lately, and I've just found that men just go too fast for me. They go so fast, and a lot of these men, like they're ready to come and they want to come, and I'm just not. I'm not even close to being ready. I need more time. Like I need more build up. I need more foreplay. I need more sensuality. I need more cuddling. I gotta get warmed up. I'm not ready to go off the bat. I can't do that. And I think a lot of men expect that. I think men's sexuality is you have to be ready to go right away. You have to be 100% erect right off the bat, and you have to, you know, you have to ejaculate. There's also the expectation of ejaculation. So there's a lot to that there. But yeah, I think that just men would benefit a lot just from slowing down with themselves and slowing down with their partner, and maybe getting to know their partner a little better. If they're not used to that, I think that maybe they would benefit from maybe exploring their connection a little bit more. But of course, that's all subjective. That all depends on the relationship dynamics between the people. So I don't know, but I think a lot of men would benefit from slowing down for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think it is absolutely helpful to do that. Like if I leap into something right away, am I really giving myself the benefit of exploring the richness of that depth, or am I just staying at the surface level? That's kind of the look at it. And if I'm leaping into something right away with somebody else, what does that say about the level of connection I have with myself?
Mhm. Mhm.
Because it's probably just surface level as well. But if I take my time and I go slower and cultivate a rich relationship with myself and go slower with other people as well, there is more depth, there is more reality and rawness and relationality with it, and it becomes something that just it's juicy. I mean, one of the things I'm enjoying about this conversation here is we're going all over the place, and it is so juicy. It is so wonderful, and it's just part of this continuing narrative of getting to know each other. Like, you and
Yeah.
I've talked a couple times. We've seen each other on social media. We'll probably, undoubtedly, I have no doubt we'll talk again.
Oh
But
yeah.
it's it's one of those things where it's like, you can't have the richness right away without going slower and allowing yourself to have those moments where you appreciate the journey. If you're just focused on the outcome, well, it's like, okay, it's like trying to go as fast as you can. Ba, 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 right? But there's no real touch there. Whereas if I just go slower, now there's touch.
Then you
There's
get all the
friendship.
nuances and all the different sensations. You actually get to feel it and explore it more. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about sacred sexuality. I think we've kind of been kind of going around it, but what is sacred sexuality?
Um, I think there's a couple different ways you could define sacred sexuality. I think that sacred sexuality, one of the ways that I look at it is it's sort of an emerging of sexuality and spirituality, sort of, the relationship between them, but it's also, on the other hand, acknowledging the sacredness of sexuality itself. And uh, I think that can mean a lot of different things to different people. But I think intentionality is a big part of it. When we talk about like creating a ritual, you're sort of setting an intention or creating a space. I think a lot of sacred sexuality is about that, is about setting an intention or creating a space for, I mean, it can be for a specific purpose, but it can just be for the sake of exploring. You don't have to have a goal in mind or anything like that. But I think but yeah, I think fundamentally it's allowing a space or having an intention in mind, uh, rather than superficial, surface level sex, rather than just focusing on the orgasm or penetration, just focusing on the whole experience and the journey of it, and the uh, the beauty and the connection and the sensations and all the different nuances of pleasure. Um, I think to me that's what sacred sexuality means. I mean, you can uh incorporate, a religious aspect of it if you want to incorporate gods and goddesses. I'm all for deities. I mean, you and I have our own deities that we work with, and I think that's wonderful too. I don't think everyone needs to do that in order for it to be sacred sexuality, but I think I think that can be an important part of it too. I mean, like I said, I tend to focus a lot on the phallic stuff, like a lot of Pan and Dionysus and Freyr, and just a lot of very phallic fertility gods. So to me, that there's an energy to that that I identify with. And at my old place before I had to move, I had a very elaborate altar, and I still have all that stuff. It's just now in storage, so I don't have a lot of doodads. But you don't have to be that elaborate. It can just be about saying, I'm going to set aside an hour for this and give myself, the space to do this. Like I said, even if you're just sitting and breathing for a few minutes or just touching yourself casually, not necessarily with the intention of having an orgasm, that can be sacred sexuality, or it can just be about cultivating or building the orgasm slowly, rather than rushing towards it. That can be sacred sexuality too. So yeah, there's lots of different, aspects to it, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, we could probably go on and on. I mean, we've really just touched the tip of this conversation. And I definitely want to have you back on down the line so we can talk about this more. Because I think, again, like what you're offering out there for people is really important. So where can people find you on the web if they want to work with you and take advantage of your amazing services, which I highly recommend, folks. Like seriously, if you're exploring your sexuality, if you're whether it's on your own or in partnership, and regardless of what kind of partnership, Anthony definitely has some heavy and amazing, awesome wisdom to drop. So where can we find you?
Well, thank you. My website and blog is strokingthesoul.com. My website is kind of under construction right now, but you can still reach me through that. I think the best way to reach me is through social media. I'm on Instagram under Stroking the Soul. I mean, you can find me under my name, Anthony Ragonese, on Facebook too. And anywhere I am, you can find me either as Anthony or Stroking the Soul. So if you look for those, you can find me. And yeah, reach out to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I primarily work with men, but I'm happy to work with other people too. If you feel that I'm a good fit for you, let's talk about it. I'm happy to help people. That's what I enjoy. So yeah. So look me up.
Boom! I just found you on Instagram and it added you. So there we go.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, I'm on all the socials. I'm on like the dreaded X/Twitter still for some reason. I'm still on there too.
I'm not on there. I got off of that one. All right, so we're gonna wrap up here, and what I would love is if you can share any final bit of wisdom to the people who are watching slash listening to this, that they can take with them as they move forward.
Hmm. I would say, I would say, step out of your comfort zone and learn something. There's always something to learn in this world. I mean,
Mm.
even as educated or self-educated as I am, I like to think I am. I'm always learning and growing. And even throughout doing the certification course, I've learned so much. There's so much that I thought I knew that I didn't. So yeah, take the time to learn and grow and challenge yourself, and do something different, learn something different, and yeah,
I
that's my
receive
advice.
that wisdom, brother. Yes, and I say yes. That's kind of like what I like to say. Challenge what you know, but by discovering what you can learn. That is so essential. Thank you, and thank you so much for coming on the show. You're my third guest now on this, so I'm starting to do more of these, and we'll definitely have you back on down the line. And I really appreciate you making some space and time for me today.
Absolutely, my pleasure. It's always wonderful talking to you. Thank you.